What is good, y'all? How is everybody doing? It is Kevin Adams, and I'm back with the amazing Asia Lyons. Asia, how are you?
I can't complain. A beautiful Sunday here in Colorado.
The weather keeps getting nicer and nicer after all that snow that we ended up March with, but I'm loving it. But we are excited to be here again for episode 5 of the exit interview. So remember, you guys can follow us at Two Dope Teachers on Instagram and Twitter. And you can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Two Dope Teachers and a mic. Our email address is twodopeteachers@gmail.com. And you can listen to us on Apple, Spotify podcasts, or at mrmunoz.org. .org. You like how I said that, Asia? If you do listen to us on Apple, give us a 5-star review. Please give us a review. It helps people find us and it gets our content out. And finally, if you want to support us, because it takes money to do this amazing stuff that we're doing here at the exit interview, head on over to our patreon.com/2dopeteachers, where you can become a patron for just $5 a month. And we hate to tell you guys this, but the book, the We Got This book is gone. So thank you to those 5 patrons who joined us. You've got the book copy coming, some other good stuff coming to you. So yeah, are we ready? Are we ready to get this started, Asia? You got anything on your mind for the people before we jump in?
No, I'm just ready and excited, and I'm looking forward to this interview. And so let's go ahead and roll.
Let's go. So tell us about our guest, who we got. Tell the people who we got.
So we're here with Dr. William A. Smith, who is a professor at the University of Utah. And we brought him on our show today because of his work with racial battle fatigue. And so he's going to tell us some of the backstory of the research he's done and make some correction to some misconceptions that he's heard out here on the web, and hopefully answer some questions for us and our audience members, as well as the folks that we've had who've been interviewed in the past, who've experienced racial battle fatigue. So hopefully he can fill us in on some things. How are you today, Dr. Smith?
I'm doing well. How about you?
No complaints.
Good.
So can you just start us off with telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm from Chicago. Been at the University of Utah for about, I think this is my 22nd year. I've been a professor since 1992. Okay. I did my undergraduate in psychology, my master's in counseling psych, and I focused on social psychology and education for my doctorate. And that kind of led me eventually to looking at, just human behaviors, stress-related illness for Black people. And then eventually, after moving to Salt Lake City, is when things kind of came together for me to look at this from a racial battle fatigue lens.
Okay, awesome. So tell us, what about Utah?
Yes.
We see the smile on your face. What about Utah?
We are in Denver, Colorado, so we might have an idea of some of the ways that being in Utah triggered it, but right. We'd love to hear you. Yeah.
Well, you know, you are a little bit better than us as far as Black population, but not too much. So, my students at Western Illinois University, when they found out I was leaving to come to Salt Lake, they called me brother professor. Yeah. And they like, you too Black for Utah. So, the thing that got me was, when you're in the Midwest, especially in the Chicagoland area, it's just flat, Yep. And if you don't live on a lake, you don't have a view of anything. And so when I came here, it was my first time in Salt Lake City, and my wife told me to be open-minded. And it just blew me away. The mountains were so gorgeous. And I always wanted to go to actually Denver, but I came here first, and then we did a trip to Denver. And I love the view of Salt Lake City much more than Denver because the mountains are so far out there. Mm-hmm. And we're like surrounded by mountain views.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's very beautiful. My department was a pretty radical department. And so you had people dealing with anti-racist activism. They were socialists, feminists, and everything else, you know.
Yes.
So I kind of felt at home, and it was
Yeah.
probably the perfect place for me to do the work I do.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, when we talked to you earlier, you were saying that Wikipedia had your story all wrong, and that your work started when you started talking about racial battle fatigue in higher ed with the educators, the professors in that space. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was my first research was on Black professors in higher education. Um, so Black women and men.
Yes.
And so the very first time that I presented racial battle fatigue, actually, I think was in Chicago at the American Psychological Association, and then a few other places following that. So the first professional introduction of it was in 2003, although some of the reports out here you see in articles will say 2008, something like that. But no, it was much earlier. And then later I did a focus on Black men. And like now I'm doing I have a national study on Black women in racial battle fatigue.
Mm.
Oh, awesome. So when you first introduced this information and you were talking to folks about it at these conferences, what was the response?
Well, you wouldn't believe it. Initially, I had a lot of haters out there. So I was getting attacked. You know,
Oh, wow.
it was all in your head, and you just talking about soft people, marshmallows, and things like that. And then the word got out because don't let the PhD fool you. I'm from
Yeah.
Chicago. I can hold my own. So
Yo, we know about y'all from the shop. We know how y'all roll.
I'm like, I ain't scared to move no furniture.
That's right.
So, so I wasn't gonna be a punk, a pushover, nothing like that. So, so I started getting, I kept presenting it, and more people started showing up that looked like us. And
Yes.
as those audience became darker,
Yes.
then the reception was much better. And then to the point that at one conference, I think it was American Educational Research Association meeting, I had a brother who was sitting next to me.
Yes.
He heard it for the very first time.
Yes.
And he started crying. And he was a panelist.
Mm-hmm.
And because some of the symptoms that I talked about,
Yes. Go.
he started seeing that they related to him, and his doctor was misdiagnosing him.
Hmm.
So he even had rashes. And so he was wondering why he would break out when he would go to work.
Uh-huh.
He's a professor going to a historically white campus
Yes.
to teach. And when he would be in faculty meetings and all this stuff, he'd just break out. And it was because it was so racially insensitive and kind of a hostile environment. So, the reception got better. And then it has grown, and now it's pretty much international and viral. I just saw something in the UK that got released, and you're starting to see dissertations all over the world, and publications all over the world in different disciplines. So we know that it's relevant and it's speaking to the pain that people experience.
Yeah. No, I love that story because when Asia first mentioned the idea of racial battle fatigue to me, I was because I was like, wait, how have I never heard of this? And I was like, oh, this is this thing that I'm experiencing, and I have it, and I love that you said like that reaction that people gave at first. Oh, it's in your head. Are you being soft? Because I do that to myself. Oh, don't you got to, because we're raised a certain way to accept all this pressure. Raised in a culture that says, oh, everything's gonna be against you. But then when you're up in it, you're like, is this how it's supposed to be? Is it supposed to be this hard and this difficult? So you mentioned some of the symptoms, like in your research. Can you just go through for our listeners, what are some of those symptoms that of racial battle fatigue? So when folks can, we know we have a problem with diagnosis in the Black community and medical treatment. So
Right.
how can you help us educators better be more informed on our own, health and well-being.
Oh, no problem. So there's basically three major categories of racial battle fatigue. So there's the psychological stress responses, there are the emotional behavioral stress responses, then there's the physiological stress responses. So let's start with the psychological. And you'll probably, if you had a checklist, you'll probably check off many of these. But have you ever been frustrated in these racially insensitive and hostile environments? Probably you have, right?
Mm-hmm.
You may have grown defensive towards some of the reactions and responses that you receive. You could grow apathetic, irritable. You can have sudden changes in mood, shock. Like we always seem like we're shocked. So if we're shocked, then that means that we were not on guard for the potentiality that something might happen like it did.
Yep.
If our guards are up, and usually when our guards are up, that's also stressful because we're not supposed to be guarded all the time. So then it can lead to anger, disappointment, resentment, anxiety, worry, disbelief that it even happened, right? Definitely disappointment, helplessness, hopelessness, and potentially fear. And I always say that, particularly for Black faculty, staff, students, and even other racially marginalized group, we live between risk and fear.
Mm.
Risk and fear, because we have to navigate and negotiate how we respond, how we act. Should I speak up on this? Should I say stay silent?
Yep.
Should I make a big deal out of a big deal situation, or should I just bite my lip? All of that is stressful. So that's the psychological stress responses. The emotional behavioral ones is John Henryism, Jane Henryism,
Yes.
stereotype threat.
Yep.
It's maybe increased commitment to spirituality. How about imposter syndrome?
Yes.
We've all experienced that, right?
Sure, yeah.
It can even lead to procrastination. Some of the bad maladaptive responses are increased smoking, increased use of alcohol, swearing. You might withdraw from people, right? You might increase your commitment, your spiritual commitment, or you might withdraw from it.
Yep.
Right. So you might have changes within your family dynamics. So all of those are emotional behavioral ones. Then you have the physiological ones. And those physiological ones are things like headaches. You might grind your teeth at night, clenched jaws, chest pain, shortness of breath, muscle aches, rashes, as I mentioned earlier. You might have sleep disturbances, insomnia, frequent illness, because think about it. If you can't go to bed at night and sleep, recover, rejuvenate, rest, then, and if you're on guard during your sleep, like you're on guard during the day, then when does your body have time to recuperate? So really what you're doing is, it's like if you have your fist clenched during the day because of all the things you have to deal with, and then you go to bed and sleep and your fists are still clenched, you're on guard. So that leads to increased likeliness that you could be sick. So you'll catch colds a lot, all right? You might get the flu. You might just feel like you got constant migraines. So all of those are physiological responses to racism, and the fact that our body is telling us that we're not in a natural environment where we can be fully human. Right?
Oh.
So what we have to realize is that racism is a violent act, and the body codes racism as an attack, as a race-related attack, a violent act.
That's powerful. When you start to go through all of those symptoms, and I'm just like, yeah, like you said, it is the checklist. it's frightening in a way, you know, because going through this, and I've been teaching for 15 years. I've stuck with it for 15 years, you know, and all of those experiences I have had in that 15 years. And the question becomes, it's like, how much can I take? Is it, what am I doing? What is the ultimate cost to me, Kevin Adams, as an educator, you know, to stick this thing out, you know, and with the goal of, like, when we enter this stuff, you know, I entered at a time where I think it's a belief where it's like you retire, you teach for 30 years, you know, I want to be there for the kids. I'm halfway through. I enjoy what I do. I think I'm good at it, but like I've waited. I'm like, when will this extra stress? Because like I'm, you know, coming into it, I heard from white teachers, they're like, oh, year 5, year 3, you know, it becomes, oh, it's so easy. It's so easy. I have never felt like it's easy, that I don't have to have that, like you said, risk and fear, right?
Yeah.
It's risk. What do I risk for my students, right? What do I not care about? You know, you teach a lesson, I plan something out, and I fear what is the reaction, right? I just went through having administration pushback on me, not too bad, but still, you know, really question the motivations of my student and why they were doing something. And ultimately they were doing something for the good of the community, and it was pushed back by one parent. And it was like, I had to answer for all of this. And I was like, it wasn't a big deal. This is not where we were going. But you know, that's my question is what are your thoughts about, like, being able to stick it out, resisting, and being able to kind of maintain throughout all of this, considering everything you've learned about racial battle fatigue?
Well, you know, it we have to realize that we're dealing with it, because if we don't realize it, then what we do is we set ourselves up um, for being, like I said, not on guard, but also in kind of a state of improper alert. And
Mm.
what that does is it compromises our physiological symptoms, psychological overload, and definitely your emotional and behavioral stress will go up. Let me put it in this way. My mentor is Chester Pierce. He was a psychiatrist at Harvard University, professor emeritus, died a few years ago in his 80s. And he's the one that gave us racial microaggressions. All right. So he coined that term. Um, and as I worked through all of these things, you know, I always would pass it off to him, just say, what do you think? And he would say, well, you're on the right track. We need to do this. But
Mm.
Dr. Pierce had this thing called STEM, right? And it's way before science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. His version of STEM as a psychiatrist was this. Um, the more your STEM is oppressed, your stress goes up. Now, let me tell you what STEM means. STEM is your space, your time, your energy, and your mobility or your movement. So, anytime an oppressive force controls your space, your time, your energy, and your mobility, then you are dealing with a stress load. When you have control over those areas, space, time, energy, and mobility, then your stress load goes down. Now, we have to control our STEM. Now, I have something called, I look at trauma informed care to racial battle fatigue, and there's 3 R's. One of them is realize. All right. We have to realize the systemic and individual nature of racism and how it causes racial battle fatigue. The next R is recognize. We have to recognize the signs and symptoms of racial battle fatigue, those things that I enumerated a few minutes ago. And then we have to respond. That's the next R. Respond by fully committing to strength based, acid based coping strategies. And the last R is this: we have to resist the individual, institutional, and systemic efforts at racial retraumatization, right? So allowing the system, the environment, the ecology to re-traumatize us, So what does that mean? What's some of the easy things that we can do? Some of the easy things that we can do is make sure your home looks like Asia's home, that picture in the background. Your picture, Kevin, in your background. You got to have blackness if you're Black people in your house. You have to control the energy and the environment, because if you have to deal with a hostile climate once you leave your door,
yes,
because we know that the enemy, they attack as soon as the Black person leaves their house.
it's right
And
on.
sometimes with like Breonna Taylor, you
That's right.
might be in your house, in your
That's
bed.
right. Say that again.
Right.
Yeah.
So if the environment feels comfortable, that it reinforces your Blackness, your culture. Um, that is one of the most healthy things you can do. And so we have to move away from those things that doesn't repair and restore us, right? And we have to move away from allowing stimuli to come in that threatens our African cosmology.
Yes.
Right. And so Joseph Baldwin talks about the kind of African socialization and African cosmology. And those are the things that are always at risk, that the television, the radio, and the outside world threatens your Blackness.
Yes.
So I don't even watch many Black movies, Black television shows, because it's all propaganda, just like it was with like Harriet, right? All propaganda, right? And so what it does is it plays on people who are unsophisticated, who just go in there not with a critical consciousness.
Yes.
And that's what Baldwin talked about. The African consciousness is that threat. So for right now, in the era that we're in, it's particularly important for Black women to watch their African consciousness, their mind, because of menticide out there. So the attack primarily is on the Black woman's mind and the Black man's body.
Yes. Oh.
And those are the two things, those are the two ingredients needed for genocide.
Can we talk about that? Two things. That nuggets. Kevin, it's a good day, Kevin.
It's a brilliant day. It's a brilliant day. This is blessings. Blessings.
Yeah. So,
wisdom.
Dr. Smith, I need you to go back and talk about that in one moment. But I wanted to say this, that a month or so back, I was talking to a group about my research, and a woman said to me, I couldn't get pregnant as a teacher. It's a Black woman told me this. And until I left teaching, and then I could get pregnant. And she said, till I was talking about racial battle fatigue and how it affects the family, she said, I didn't have the words, I didn't know. And it just dawned on her. So I just think about that panel you talked about, and like how many people, like once they know, they can never not know.
Right.
So yeah, I wanted to put that out there to the audience members, because you didn't mention it, and I want to talk about like this idea. And obviously this is not my like life's work, but infertility, right? And it makes sense. That's a part of it. It can be. Now, can we go back to the woman's mind and the man's body, the Black man's body and the Black woman's mind, with this racial battle fatigue, and like how do we like resist? Please.
Yes.
No problem. What we have to do, we have a book that's coming out. It's the third edition of the Racial Crisis in American Higher Education. I have a chapter in that breaks all of these things down. It should be published this summer. But we have to understand that Black people are targets of genocide. We're targets of genocide. So some people might hear that and say, well, wait a minute, what do you mean genocide? Come on now. No genocide, right? That's something
that's right.
The indigenous folks here or later on. No. And actually, this is really timely. In 1951, William Patterson took to the UN, so that's 70 years ago.
Yes.
He took to the UN a document, a report that said, we charge genocide.
Yes.
And what it was a complaint on the US government for victims against the Negro people. Now, what he did was he looked at what was happening in the short period of time that we call the Holocaust and the crimes against the Jews there.
Yep.
Over 400 years of crimes against Black people, enslavement, the Black Code period, Jim Crow, and if you understand Michelle Alexander's work,
Yep.
the new Jim Crow.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So here's the part that we have to come to terms with. The definition of genocide is the whole or part destruction of a group at the mental and physical level. All right. So who is the most educated in our group? Black people.
Yes.
It's the Black woman. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Who is the one that's most targeted with crimes of the state? The Black man.
That's right.
So if we look at the killings of unarmed Black men again with the police, 95%, or let's say Black people, 95% of the deaths are Black men. So we don't know all the names of those Black men that die every year, but it's upwards of 300 and about anywhere from 12 to 15 Black women. So the destruction of the body is on the man and the mind of the woman, because she's the one that's breaking glass ceilings. She's the one that's typically the only Black person in high level positions, right? So we have to control that. And if we can get her off her base and the Black man off his base, then it can be a successful genocide. So like with that movie, Harriet, we don't study Harriet. Most of the things that we know about Harriet was from grade school, because they only allow elementary books to be published on her.
Yep.
There was one book really that I know of written, one biography that was written about Harriet while Harriet was alive and she talked to her, and that is Harriet, the Moses of her people.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And if you read this book, then you'll know that most of that stuff in the movie didn't occur. There was no Black man who was a slave catcher. How can a Black man be a slave catcher? Right? What papers are going to get you out of being made a slave again? Go to the north and take back to the right? So what sense does that make? But we are so gullible that we are emotional that we want to see ourselves and not think critically that what we did was allow them to castigate the Black man in that movie. So all of Harriet's pain was Black men.
Yes.
Nothing was about white supremacy. But if you read her book, and there was no love affair, that white slave master didn't love her. Yeah. He didn't stop a Black man from putting a bullet in her head. That's not what Harriet said. Harriet said the opposite. He was brutal. And she said that she got beat severely, almost like skin coming off of her, from a white woman who made her stay up all night to make sure her baby, the white woman's baby, didn't wake her. And if the baby cried, Harriet would get beat. And then Harriet was supposed to clean the house. She was just a little girl. She didn't know how to clean the house. The woman would severely beat her. And it was the white woman's sister who came down and then said, well, how does she know how to clean if you never teach her? All right. So the thing is, what I'm suggesting only is this, is that Harriet herself, Queen Mother Harriet, tells us about white supremacy and tells us all the things that occurred. Why would Hollywood do what they did and make up, you can't give me creative license, and make up all of those situations so they can control the mind.
That's right.
And make it easier to see us in a less than position. So that's the menticide that we keep watching on TV and in movies because we don't think critically. So we have to really watch what we consume, because what we're consuming is poison. Just read it. This is her book is less than 100 pages.
Yep.
Read it.
Say the book title again for our audience, please.
It's written by Sarah Hopkins Bradford. The book is Harriet, the Moses of Her People, a biography of Harriet Tubman. She was alive when the biography was being written and was being interviewed by Bradford.
And that's the interesting thing, Dr. Smith, right now is we see, and I think we see it with Dr. King, with all of these movies that come out, is there's a revamping of the story. Like the story is being told in a different way. And I love this point about critical thinking. And I think it ties back to your point about the role of resistance, right? As educators, and when I think about my role as an educator, it's a big part of it is teaching kids to think critically about the world around them, about the situations they find themselves in. And I teach sixth grade right now, and it's amazing how much white supremacy that the kids have already internalized about the way the world works and relationships and why people are in certain situations, and so it really is fascinating. And to think about Harriet's example of who she really was versus who they want to tell us she was, right? I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, you know that old saying, if you want to keep information from Black people,
hide it in the book.
Put it in a book.
We can't be easy victims, easy prey. We know we've had study group book clubs since the 20s. We have to bring them back and have discussions. We need to read books like Urugu from Ani.
Yes.
Right? You can't read it by yourself because it's heavy. So you got to be in discussion groups and break that stuff down. We need to read the autobiography of Assata Shakur.
Yes.
Right? So we can understand what our plight is, what the historical situations were, and how are they changed today. Remember what they said. J. Edgar Hoover said what? Do not allow the rising of a Black Messiah.
That's right.
And so every time, what did he do when he had Black groups? He would kill the head. He shot King. He shot Malcolm. He shot Fred Hampton. All these people, right? Now, if they're millionaires today, then we have to kind of look at them a little differently, right?
Yep.
So, because like Kwame Ture say, revolutionaries aren't millionaires.
They aren't.
That is interesting. So I think about that, and I want to switch this over to say, like, how many revolutionaries are administrators? How many? I pushed upon this idea of Black educators, BIPOC educators in administrative positions, superintendents, assistant superintendents, these higher places, and have you not experienced or turned an eye to the racial battle fatigue of other Black educators this whole time? We just kept moving up the ranks. Like, how does that work, right? I think about that, and I think about is it this like, okay, when I get more power, then I'm going to say something. When I get this next position, then I'm going to speak up. And
once I'm superintendent, everything, I'm going to change it all.
Yeah, when I become superintendent, I'm going to change it all. And meanwhile, Black folks, educators, are fleeing education for their lives while waiting for someone to get some more power, right? So the same thing about being a millionaire, same thing with positions of power in education, right? That's how I see it.
Yeah, no, you're right. And see, not too many administrators are revolutionary, but administrators can do revolutionary work. Just like teachers can do revolutionary work because they control the development of the minds. So you can teach off of the curriculum. They say that hidden curriculum. So we need to take ownership of that and make a hidden curriculum. What happened in the 60s and the 70s? If you were born and you were in school then, and in Black communities, what you were being taught was kind of Black power and Black pride.
Yes.
And that is what the system feared. And so they had to destroy that. So they know education is a valuable tool to lead to the liberation of Black people. So we have to control it. Remember the minds. Everything that we do has to run through a litmus test. How does it impact the mind and bodies of Black people? And critically think about, as I've coined other terms, anti-Black misogyny, anti-Black misandry. What about those things promote the hatred, the destruction, the invisibility of Black women? What about those things do the same for Black men? Right? So we have to get off of our oppression sweepstakes and say we're family. I don't care if you're poor, rich, gay, straight, trans, you have ability issues, whatever it is, we're family. So if I allow somebody to attack a member of my family, I have no power.
That's right. That's right.
I love that. I love that.
No, I think it's so important. Just when I think about the movement, for Black liberation, it's got to be all of us. It can't be turning us against each other. It becomes easy, and that's what I think when I hear you talking about genocide is also that's rooted in there, is turning us against each other, and so, looking back on everything you've talked about and thinking about racial battle fatigue, like the question is, can we hope to use, and you said education can be powerful, but are we as teachers, are we justified in looking, and I don't know if it's justified, but are we looking in the right place if we look for education as a means of Black liberation? Is education still, because I think for a long time it was, a space of it, but I just think about the attack on schools, on Black teachers in particular, even though they say they want us. Anytime I think we move in that direction where we are pro-Black, we uplift our students, our BIPOC students, we support LGBTQ plus, students and community members. We try to build intersectional movements. I feel like that's constantly attacked, right? And more so in our city, we have a lot of charter schools and schools that don't make the cut and get taken over. And it feels like those are often schools that are trying to do the things that we are talking about that are needed, right? And they're the schools that are more harshly judged for their test scores. Teachers get lower ratings. So what are your thoughts about how all of that type of stuff plays out?
Yeah, we have to control our education. And we have to, again, learn from history, right? So one of the things is we need to have more Black independent schools again.
Yes.
We need to support them. We have the money. Don't believe that Black folks can't pay for things. We have the economic ability within our group to basically control our whole destiny. So we have to realize and believe in ourselves. What has happened now is, when I said that attack is on the mind and the body, now the major attack is on the Black woman's mind and the major attack is on the Black man's body. But the Black man's mind is being attacked too. And the Black woman's body is being attacked as well. So what we have to realize is, what is education? You remember Mwalimu Shuja had a book called Too Much School and Too Little Education, right? So we don't want to be schooled, we want to be educated, right? So that could be after school programs, right? If you belong to a Black church or something like that, all right, let's have something that educates them on critical thinking skills, the kids in the school. We have to take more control. See, what's happened is the Black community is not only dealing with racial battle fatigue, but one of the levels of racial battle fatigue that they're dealing with is cultural depression.
Yes.
Right. So cultural depression, you want to, I'm just too tired. I want to give up. I don't have the energy. I'll just leave me alone. I don't want to do that fight. But what that means is you need therapy. cultural therapy, right? So you need help to make sure that you can keep your head above water enough to fight your enemy. And we have to understand who is our enemy. Anybody that tries to attack the Black body and the Black mind, right? So that means that we can't allow, we have to draw from the culture that we once had in African consciousness and culture. That has been attacked since the 60s. All right. So now what the culture that many of us think is Black culture is created by Hollywood.
Yes.
Sure.
Right.
It can be bought and sold.
So now Nicki Minaj is Black culture. Now some people could say that, yeah, well, there were sisters dancing like that in Africa, but they had spiritual principles behind the cultural reasons why they dance a certain way, and we weren't looking at it in as a sexual marketplace.
Yes.
Right. So don't try to confuse your distorted way expression of our culture with high culture of Africa. Right. And even the high culture. I mean, think about this. There's a book, Leroy Jones. Now I'm forgetting the name that he changed his name to, but it was Blues People was the book. And he, in that book, he said that once African stopped singing songs in their culture and in their language, from their culture and their language, and start singing the blues and jazz and stuff, we became African Americans.
Yes.
Right. So we have to reach back. Now, there's nothing wrong with being African American.
Yes.
Because there's some deep culture there. Because we built Tulsa, we built Rosewood, we built Bronzeville in Chicago.
That's right.
White supremacy attacked it. We have to be smarter than our oppressors, but we have to go back and have that belief in self and develop that African consciousness. And that's what education is about. If you're not teaching to enlighten and liberate and protect the mind and also the body. Now, we have to become healthy because our attack is at a physiological level all around and a mental level, right? So that means that if we're going to fight white supremacy, we got to be in shape.
That's right.
So we have to make a pledge. Now, we know that the cortisol flood that we get from having to be stressed out all the time also impacts our weight. Either we can lose too much or we gain a whole bunch. But it doesn't explain the whole variance of why Black folks are overweight. So that means that we got to eat better. We got to meditate. We got to make sure our environment smells like collard greens. And we got to have, we don't, I didn't even know what potpourri was. I was calling it potpourri when I went to college, right? I didn't know how to spell it.
That's
and white people would say, no, it's potpourri. I'm like, well, what is potpourri? And they say you put in a little bowl with all these dried flowers. I said, no. We got collard greens in my house. We got black-eyed peas.
That's right.
Fried chicken. Now, we can't have too much fried chicken, but it still smells good, right?
It still does.
So the thing is, we didn't have to have all them fake smells because we had stuff that nourished the body. But here's the point. Big Mama used to cook in a way that was healthy because there were certain herbs and different things she would put in the food. Lost track of because now people brag out, I don't cook, I don't know how to cook, and they feel good about that. No. We have to remember that those were like medicine women.
Sure.
So now we've taken away the things that Black women were known for and it was a strong part of our culture because she kept us healthy. I mean, we had to have castor oil. Like around this time, I was just telling my youngest son, we used to move all the furniture out of the house to do spring cleaning.
That's right.
Clean it up, right? And then you move it back. Now, and we might not be able to do that nowadays, but we can't divorce ourselves from those things and traditions that protected us for 400 years. Now, I'm not talking about eating what's the stuff out the pigs?
Chitlins.
Chitlins. I ain't talking chitlins, right?
We can put that away.
But but I'm talking about the healthy things that Big Mama would make us take and eat.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And then we would be healthy.
Greens out the yard, and that we know those dark leafy greens are probably some of the best things that you could be eating.
Exactly.
Right.
I think it's really, I'm glad that you're saying this. It's really important that we hear about the healing and the food and the mindset and the reading, right? As all of this is a way to resist, right? Because we could get into a space where folks say, I want to do massage, I'm going to do all the things that some of them are cost money and folks can't afford.
Yep.
Right. And so we have to be like, we have to recognize, like, yeah, eating healthy foods, putting good things into our body, and sleep and all these things, and building schools where the teacher belongs and the student belongs are all part of that healing. Right. I love that we're talking about that, because that's really, really important that we have to recognize it. We have to. Because if we don't, we're going to continue to see folks again like fleeing our schools, leaving our Black and brown students behind, unfortunately, dying early, right? From the stress, from the shock, from the grief, or things like that. So I'm glad that we're talking about this.
Yeah, because Black men are, even though the mortality rates the gap is closing.
Yes.
Black men are still 25 to 35 years behind Black women, and white men. So when you look at it, it's a 25 to 35 year gap, right? And so we have to understand what is going on about that. And the fact is, even though I know all this stuff, I wasn't doing the sleeping thing like I should have done until this pandemic. And I've fallen in love with getting my sleep now. And guess what happened? My memory has been the sharpest it's ever been. My recall has been the sharpest it's ever been, because I got the appropriate amount of sleep. And we don't realize that because we're taxing our bodies. And so you'd be like, I can't remember what I was doing. I can't remember where I placed it. I can't recall that study, and it's because our body is tired. And we just keep on running. And you'll drink coffee and them drinks that rock stars and all that stuff. And let me give you some data on this on Black women. There was a study that said that Black women who face daily racism had like a 2.7 odds of having lower cognitive function than those women who don't, right? The other thing is Black women who are experiencing institutionalized racism were at 3 times more risk of lower subjective cognitive functioning. What does that mean? Memory loss, Alzheimer, and which is misdiagnosed, I should say, because it's part of the racial battle fatigue response, right? But they say, oh, mama got Alzheimer's. Well, how did she get it? Right?
That's right.
So, and we keep looking at the outcome and not what happened to lead to it. And we're misdiagnosing it because racism plays a heavy part in even cognitive functioning. So we have to protect that. And there's other studies that have shown that for Black women who were stressed with racism, gender racism as teenagers, by the time they get to their 40s and 50s, if their children who are adolescents experience racism, that they have more likely to face depression and all other types of things. And guess what? Now, that isn't the case for Black men. But Black men, if their children are stressed and their wife is stressed, then they're stressed.
The stress increases for them.
They already have their own cumulative stress, but then they take the stress load of the wife and the children. Now, guess what happens with that? It's a vicious circle. When the Black father is stressed, the children feel it.
Yep. Sure.
And then they become more stressed and more likely to have early onset of depression. So it's a vicious cycle.
Dang.
Right? So people can't get away from it. Now, the mother doesn't feel as stressed about the father, but she is concerned. But she
Yes.
doesn't take there's been no positive correlation there. But it shows a vicious circle.
Sure.
Wow.
And that's how racial battle fatigue kind of works in ways in which we haven't fully understood it before because we didn't have the language and the ability to spotlight it.
It's just it's fascinating. It's
Yeah.
I mean, because when you describe it all, especially that kind of circular relationship of it all, it's stuff I've experienced in my own house, in my own family, and watched it, happen. And it's just very interesting how that plays out um, as you go through these experiences,
Yeah.
and this deeper idea that it impacts more than just like the individual, right? That it's bigger. I think this goes to Asia's research,
Mhm.
is it impacts the whole family,
Mhm.
friends, everybody.
Yeah.
And I just want to go back to this point where you talked about that cultural depression, because I'm a member of the Black Educator Caucus, and so it is doing extra work organizing, right? But and I go into it tired, and I'm like, wow, I gotta do this extra stuff, and but I always come away feeling better, right? And so it reminds me of those circles, those times where we come together. Like, I think when you go back to like coming back to our African consciousness, is communal in its nature,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so coming together, and I think in a way, our community has been really impacted by the pandemic, because it goes against our nature, which is to say, hey, we all in this together. We are communal. I got you. Let's come together. And in a lot of ways, the very thing that helps us harms us in this pandemic situation, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't have equitable care. So I just really, that hit me big. But also, you mentioned thinking about, in Asia, your point to administrators. Like, what would you advise? So we have some administrators who listen to our show. What would you recommend for how should administrators, both BIPOC administrators, but also white administrators, how can they help to reduce racial battle fatigue? Because I know they can't, because it is big, it's systematic, it's institutional. But what are some policies that a school, and I'm a part of our equity team because I'm a Black dude, so anything that happens with equity, I got to be there. Like,
Of course.
because if I'm not there, I don't know what they might do.
Right.
Right. And then if I'm not there, they're gonna tap me. But what are some things that we can do to just help to counteract the racial battle fatigue in educational institutions?
Well, one of the things we have to do is, as much as possible, limit our use of the term BIPOC.
Oh,
Mm.
All right.
oh, talk about that.
Well, first of all, as I understand it, the origins of it comes out of Canada, and that's because the POC always kind of marginalized Black and Indigenous people. So that's my understanding from where it comes from. Not that that's bad,
Yep.
but what it does is we have to disaggregate our groups. We cannot continue to put ourselves into a collective like that, because then what happens is whoever does the best skews the information for the people who are in most need.
Yes.
And so right now, Black people are in tremendous need, and Indigenous people too. All these racialized groups
Yes.
are who I call targets of white supremacy.
Yes.
So all these targets are in tremendous need, but at the very bottom of almost every social demographic factor that we see is Black people and Indigenous people, but Black people, okay? And so what do we have to do? We have to disaggregate Black people as well. So we need to know what cisgender Black women are experiencing, Black gay women are experiencing, Black trans women are experiencing, Black women with a disability are experiencing. So once we get at that finite level, right, then we can start making claims about what is needed for each particular group. As long as we put them all together, then what happens is we will not get the attention that we deserve. So we have to start to disaggregate groups. And let me put it this way. When you're in college, if the school, your university said that we did a campus climate survey and the results come back from all the students and say it's a very warm and welcoming climate, your first critique would be, well, what students? Right?
Yep.
And then they would say, well, all students. He said, no, you got to break that down for us. We need to know by race, right?
Yep.
And so you would be right to ask them that. So now let's think about Latinx as a group. Who does it benefit and who does it hurt?
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know what the attention that Puerto Ricans might need.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what Guatemalans might need.
That's right.
We don't know what Honduran Americans might need, because the biggest group is Mexican American, right? And so we need to disaggregate all those groups. Asian Americans the same way.
Yep.
Right? Because it's really, we talk about as racist when you aggregate. So why do we keep perpetuating that? Right? So we want to know the dropout rates by certain groups, disaggregated. So we have to do better than that. Now for administrators, what we need is for them just to quit being so racist. One.
Well, there it is.
There it is. There it is.
There's the show right there.
And two, even if we look at Derek Bell's concept of interest convergence,
yes,
they benefit more by having Black folks in the schools.
That's right.
As teachers, as administrators, as staff, and as students.
That's right.
So here's the thing. We know that. So that means that we bring a resource to the schools that people drain from us, and we don't get anything hardly in return.
That's right.
Right. But what we've also learned from studies, Goldsmith has a study out that looked at Black teachers, and Black teacher was Black, white students, Latino and white students. And what they found was that when they had Black teachers, their critical thinking skills went up, their critical consciousness went up, their scores went up. But when they had white teachers, the Black and brown students suffered.
Sure.
All right. So what that tells you, that there's something that Black teachers bring that other teachers don't have, particularly white teachers. But let me say this: the white students benefited too in better ways than they did with just a white teacher. So there's something language. There's something about what you are as a human being and your experiences, that you are a master teacher that's being under-evaluated and underappreciated and under-recognized.
Yeah.
Powerful,
Use the word drain. It is powerful. And that word drain.
Yes.
That's the feeling when I taught, was drain. And it's interesting. Just recently, I started to tell people when they say, well, how long did you teach? Well, I was in education for 12 years, and 10 of those years, I uplifted white supremacy culture.
Yeah.
It wasn't into those last 2 years where I started to speak up and do the things you spoke about, as then I began to feel that drain, and I began to be pushed out.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's so interesting.
Yeah. What we have to do as Black folks is make these professions are night jobs, and the liberation of our people are day jobs.
Day jobs. That's right.
That finances your liberation. Right? So you take the resources that you can from your collective education and experiences and let somebody pay you for those resources, and then you use that as an opportunity to provide for your people. So I'm a professor. I'm well paid. I'm well recognized.
Mm-hmm.
That's my night job.
That's
my
right.
day job is everything I do. I mean, I got the Spencer Foundation's Mentor of the Year Award. right? That's because I'm helping Black people.
That's right.
Right? I'm helping young Black professors to get tenure and promoted, right?
Yes.
I'm helping graduate students. So my goal is the liberation and the edification of our people.
But that's what that mean when you talk about that again, African consciousness, what African education traditionally was, it was more of that one-on-one. Those are the most powerful people who brought me aside, put their arm around me, let me understand where I was okay, that I was going to be somebody. I had, a destiny because I was important and I came from important people. Right. And I think that's where it goes back to. I think when you're talking about resisting the racial battle fatigue and just I don't know, it's just powerful stuff. It's stuff that I'm at the end of spring break. I'll be honest. I'm like, can I not go back the last 2 months? Can I not? Because that's how I'm like in the end, like I'm like the Bernie Mac joke. Because like I go on break. Right. I ain't sitting at my desk. I'm on break. I'll be back when I go on break. Bernie Mac said.
Yeah. Well, see, you gotta shift that cognitive reality and make that your night job.
Yes.
Help all students. Now we as Black people, we're gonna help everybody anyway.
Right. That's right.
But we gonna help all the students, but make like this, your podcast and other things that helps for the liberation of our people. What we have to remember is we got misled with the concept of church. Church talks about a broken body of people.
Yes.
Right? Well, it primarily focuses on Jesus. But Heru in Kemet, Egypt, was also a broken body that had to be put back together. Right? So what church really represents, what you were talking about this pandemic and the need for Black people to be together, is part of the broken body. So people kind of misunderstand the purpose of church or organization. It's about the energy and the power of the collective coming together for a common goal, right? So what we need is more organizations. That's what Kwame Ture used to always say. The problem with Black people is that we lack, and he used to use his little accent, organization, right? He said we always had a plan for the march, but we didn't have a plan for the day after the march. And so what we have to do as a collective is remember to join organizations of like-minded people with like-minded goals, and then enjoy that opportunity of coming together for a common good, right? Because that is the body of Heru coming back together, or as a Christian would say, the body of Christ coming together.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Smith, I hate to end this.
No problem.
And we will be here all night just getting the jewels, the gems. I have written down STEM. I've written down so much information. I hope that our audience can hear this.
Book recommendations, all of it. Like, I mean, it's all, this is a good one. This is, I mean, I think it's important because we've been talking about racial battle fatigue, but I think this gives a real solid context for, this podcast and just, I think, the importance of the work that you've done, Dr. Smith, and the work, Asia, that you are engaging in, and all the work. I think it's more powerful. And I love this idea that people were like, oh, that's not real. And then they start to see it, because I think that's how it always is that people are like, oh, you're making this up.
Right.
Hey, like, I'm not making this. This is my lived experience. If you let me study it intellectually and you allow me to take it where it goes, you're going to discover some things that I think are important to, this institution of education that is, in need of more Black educators. And as you pointed out, Dr. Smith, all kids benefit from having Black educators. All kids. It's better to have Black teachers in your school than not.
Right.
Yeah. And not draining them, by the way.
And not draining them.
You got to support them, give them the resources, and, recognize them and their kind of community cultural wealth that they bring.
Yes.
All right. Well, we're gonna have to wrap up this episode
All right.
5 of because we're gonna be all night out here with these.
I'll come back. I'll come back when you invite.
Yes.
We will be inviting you back for sure. Because we still didn't have any chance to really talk about some of the stories that we've heard, and we'd love to hear your opinions and thoughts and ideas about some of the folks that have come across our podcast so far. But yeah, just thank you so much for coming and speaking to us, to our audience. We really appreciate your research and your work. Just thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here.
5 of the Exit Interview. We'll see you all next time. Bye.